We welcome Deputy Pearse. Doherty, please.
Agus ara te costa sí mortgage te RD ag na mílte únearí tí agus seo tarú ar RD na réti ús te feiceiste le coppla míon agus íra se ní smasas na mína má róin de réir mar a méid ha réti trasna an ward agus de réir mar a bhín ibrithe agus teile ag déile sin géircéim seo an costas an géircéim costas maralta te takeart a dhéharú agus fuisiú mortgage in our dúrim de dhéharú. Minister, for homeowners, the cost of living crisis has opened up a new front as mortgage interest rates continue to rise. Now, the ECB has increased its key interest rate. It took effect yesterday, with a further hike expected next month. As we know, retail banks have not yet passed on ECB rates in full, but it is widely expected that rates will rise significantly across the board in the coming months. For others, the impact has been immediate and the impact has been severe. The tens of thousands of homeowners who had their mortgages sold off to vulture funds were time and time again given assurances by government ministers that they had nothing to worry about. The Taoiseach told them that they would be no worse off, while the Minister for Public Expenditure went as far in saying that he would be happy if his mortgage was sold off to a vulture fund. These assurances were naive in the extreme back then, and they have proven to be completely and utterly false. I and my party warned about this at the time, years ago, and now we see tens of thousands of borrowers whose loans are held by vulture funds, and they're now at the sharp edge of the interest rate hikes. Many of them are facing interest rates of 7.5%. They are paying as much as €400 more per month in interest than they would be paying had their mortgages not been sold off. They have no option to switch, no options to fix their rate, and they describe themselves as mortgage prisoners with nowhere to turn. One homeowner contacted me whose mortgages was sold by Permanent TSB to Start Mortgages. She's a full-time carer for her son. Her son has cerebral palsy. And by January, she had received 4 letters, each informing her of a further rate increase. She's now paying over €4,000 in additional interest this year, and with further hikes coming down the line, the hike that took effect yesterday and the one that is planned for March. She said, hikes across the board are barely sustainable, but to have the constant fear every month of the next increase coming and how to finance the previous month's increase is inhumane. Now, Minister, many households face this reality. They have received as many as 5 letters through the door and will receive the 6 next months when the ECB hikes its rate again. As the banks increase their interest rates in the coming months, thousands more households will face higher mortgage costs. And for many, this is a breaking point. Being able to pay your mortgage is just as important as being able to pay your rent or your energy bill, and the alternatives are just as serious. Arrears, increased debt, financial hardship. So Sinn Féin have called on your government to introduce targeted and temporary mortgage interest relief to support homeowners who are and will face spiralling interest and mortgage costs. The Minister for Finance has rejected this proposal. He is wrong to do so. Your party campaigned in 2016 in that general election to extend mortgage interest relief when the rates for many were half what they are now that those who are in the hands of the vultures are paying. So I'm asking you, Minister, will you consider introducing targeted and temporary mortgage interest relief to support these homeowners who are now paying up to 7.5% interest rate in the hands of vulture funds and will be paying 8% when the ECB increases its interest rate within 4 weeks?
As you know, this was debated with your own motion last night and also was raised in leaders' questions yesterday, and you will know that the formulation of monetary policy is an independent matter for the European Central Bank. We're acutely aware that the ECB has hiked its key interest rates by 3% since last July to fight inflation, and that's the reason it is being done. And we do expect possibly 2 further rate increases. It is up to each individual lender, as you'll know, to decide on whether to pass on those increases. The government has no role in setting retail interest rates, and you'll know that also. It's solely a matter a commercial matter for those individual lenders. It is important to note also that the average interest rate on new mortgages in Ireland was 2.69% in December, and the average rate for mortgages in the Eurozone was actually just short of 3%. So we're one of the lowest new variable rates in Europe, and that's been a significant change over the last number of years. At the Finance Committee last month, representatives from the Central Bank reiterated that regulated lenders, including banks and non-banks, have very clear obligations under the Code of Conduct on Mortgage Arrears and the Central Bank's supervisory regime to have supports, resources and options available for any borrower who feels they may be challenged in meeting their mortgage repayments. In November 2022, the Central Bank wrote to lenders to emphasise the onus on them to review their product lines and suites of options to make sure they remain fit for purpose. And in the case of credit, that means making sure the loans remain affordable. And thankfully, we have seen a continued reduction in long-standing mortgage arrears rates have actually fallen quite substantially over the last number of years. The bank's supervisory regime focuses on affordability and kicks in not just when a person falls into arrears, but when a person is facing arrears. It is more extensive, detailed and intrusive than in any other European jurisdiction. The Central Bank last week said that in the area they are most focused on at the moment is the area that you've raised, the 38,000 borrowers who are on high interest rates with the non-bank lenders, who do not have a full suite of options available to them. Many cannot switch into fixed. Many can and aren't aware that they can if their loan if their loan right now is a performing loan. Minister McGrath actually this week again met with the Governor of the Central Bank and asked the regulator whether it needs more legal powers to assist such mortgage holders, and that is being worked on right now. Borrowers that are facing financial difficulty should, as we know, engage with lenders as early as possible as a way of addressing the issues. And borrowers can appeal any decision, as you know as well, to the Financial Services Ombudsman. Now, in relation to specific tax measures, and Deputy, you'll know this too, tax decisions are made in a coordinated way through the annual budget process, which generally follows the establishment of a pathway taking into account the National Economic Dialogue, Summer Economic Statement and indeed the Tax Strategy Group deliberations. Mortgage interest relief, which cost the Exchequer actually more than €700 million a year if you go back to 2008, and that was the final year before the gradual phasing out of the mortgage interest relief. Your own proposals to reintroduce mortgage interest relief will be of no benefit to fixed-rate mortgages, yet the average outstanding balance as of June 2022 on tracker mortgages is about 107,000, whereas the corresponding figure for fixed-rate mortgages is just short of 175,000. Moreover, the average new mortgage drawdown in Q3 2022 was 284,000, and thankfully the vast majority of new mortgages, over 90% of new mortgages lent in Ireland right now, are on a fixed-rate basis. There are issues with the non-bank lenders, and Minister McGrath has been working with the Governor of the Central Bank about strengthening the code there and asking the Central Bank themselves of what additional powers they would require to help in that space.
Deputy Doherty.
Minister, when your party clubbed with Fine Gael to prevent legislation to ensure that these loans weren't sold to the vulture funds, you gave commitments that they would be no worse off. How naive was that? How false of a promise was that? These individuals are paying thousands and thousands of euro more now as a result of them being sold to a vulture fund. I gave an example of Rachel. She's paying €4,000 extra interest than she would have been this time last year. That's a serious amount of money. And before this month's interest rate hike kicks in and next month's interest rate hike kicks in, you handed them over to the vultures, and the vultures are preying on them at this point in time. They're being charged 7.5% interest rate, and it's going to go up next month to 8%. Now, you say it's over to the Central Bank. We know the limitations of the Central Bank. These vulture funds, in the main, are not offering fixes. They're not offering reduced rates. They are offering you pay your mortgage or we come after you. Now, there is a solution here. It's not about taking away all of the pain, but it is about reintroducing mortgage interest relief at a targeted, tailored way. Not the way that you've introduced it in the past, which covered all interests, but the increased interest since June of last year. So do you not consider it appropriate for people who are paying over €5,000 more on interest that some measure would be introduced to help them in the middle of a cost of living crisis?
Deputy, I think it's slightly disingenuous as well to look at this in isolation. You neglected to mention the cost of living measures that we brought forward in the last budget the most significant package of measures brought forward, more than yourselves actually even looked for. And the other issue is your own targeted measure, as far as we can discern, would affect about 716,000 mortgages. You haven't provided any costings to us. You were asked for that as well. We can estimate that your approach would cost about 655 million. Now, you've got to make choices within that. And no, it's not. Well, you should actually, I would ask you to publish your proposals, because at many juncture, Deputy, you bring forward, on any issue, you bring forward what you deem simple solutions. You never publish costings for them. You never publish legislation for them. You bring forward a motion. So the reality of it is, this government's stewardship of our economy over the last 2-3 years has meant that we've been able to bring forward unprecedented measures in relation to cost of living, in relation to increased social welfare payments, targeted at the right people. The issue in relation to non-bank lenders is a real one, Deputy. It is a real one, and that's, as I've said to you, for fear of repeating myself, that Minister McGrath is engaged with the central bank in that space. So provide your costings, and publish them.